Every year coming the NFL draft, you'll have a couple of players that just shock all the pundits and all the experts and so-called gurus with where they end up getting drafted. You know, every year there's a couple of those guys. Usually there's one of them in the top 10, 2 to 3 more of them between picks 11 to 20, and then 1 or 2 more at the tail end of round 1. It happens every damn year. Nobody was talking about this guy going in the top 10, and he did. Nobody was talking about this guy being a mid-first round pick, and he did. Nobody was talking about this guy going in the first round at all, yet they find a way to sneak into the tail end of round 1. And those guys every year. And one of those guys, I think, this year, that in my eyes could end up surprising a lot of people with how high he is potentially drafted, because the buzz about him isn't huge, and because of some of the narratives out there about him aren't the greatest or the most glowing. I think Leonard Floyd fits into that category of a guy that could surprise people potentially, with where he ends up getting drafted. He's 6'6", 240 pounds, a redshirt junior coming out of Georgia. And when I watch him on film, you know, I know some of the narratives, and this is a guy I was talking about a lot early on in the build-up to the 2015 NFL draft, because I thought maybe as a redshirt sophomore there was a chance that he would declare, and people were questioning his ability, though, to play the running game, and he needed to go back. So he did go back to school. And maybe it helped his draft stock. Maybe it didn't. I guess ultimately only time will tell. But here's what I see about Leonard Floyd that I really like about his game, and I think people talk about negatives or the concerns too much with certain prospects. This is one of them, because he brings a lot of positive things. You know, you start off with his height and his length. Yeah, he's not a big dude, you know, 240 pounds, but he is 6'6" with long arms. You know, to have that type of guy with that type of height and length, you know, that's a guy that could do himself really, really good if he properly learns how to utilize his hands and utilize his length. I mean, this is a guy that could be a really disruptive force on the edge. You just can't teach that height and length. 6'6" with long arms is 6'6" with long arms, and they don't make all the edge rushers like that. He's got more than that, though. He's got good initial burst quickness. He's got better speed than he's frankly given credit for. You know, he ran a 4.60 40 at the combine, and that's pretty much true to form for who he is. That's pretty good. Again, at 6'6", 240 pounds. It's more than enough speed than he will need. This is a guy to me that did demonstrate the past couple of years at Georgia, when he was utilized on the edge, the ability to actually get around the corner and break the edge in that 5 to 7 yard window. And I like that out of my edge rushers. I want those guys that don't get the edge 9 or 10 yards past the line of scrimmage, 3 yards behind the quarterback. I like those guys that can actually get to the edge and get around the edge where the quarterback actually is. You know, I think with Leonard Floyd, people sleep on his pass rush moves too, in part because in 2015, the way he was utilized at Georgia, he wasn't utilized a lot as a pass rusher. They played him a lot inside at linebacker. Not that I particularly am a fan of that. I don't think that was a smart utilization of him by head coach Mark Richt. I just really don't see why you would do that. You know, maybe some people will think that'll help his versatility and help his potential at the NFL level because he learned how to play the game a different way. I just don't know. But this was a guy that does show me an okay array of pass rush moves. I mean, better than some of the other pass rushers in this draft. You know, not as good as maybe somebody like a Noah Spence, but he's got some pass rush moves there. Better than people give him credit for. I will say one thing that maybe helped with him playing inside a little bit more in 2015 is he had to play more of a coverage role. He had to play more zone. He had to play more man-to-man. And I thought he did all right there. I thought he showed some real coverage ability, some coverage potential at the NFL level that could make him a versatile type of weapon. Now you talk about versatility. This is a guy with versatility. This is a guy that's played on the edge. This is a guy that's played inside. This is a guy that's played a lot of different places. He's played in the slot some. And that kind of Swiss Army knife type of feel to him will help him, I think, ultimately at the NFL level, even if I wasn't a huge fan of how he was utilized at Georgia in 2015. Two other things, though, that really jump out on film to me about Leonard Floyd, and I really, really like them, are his physicality and his effort. This is not an incredibly strong dude. In fact, that's one of his biggest concerns I have about him and his potential and reaching his potential at the NFL level is his strength. But at 6'6", 240 pounds, he's not afraid to mix it up. He does not shy away from contact. He is not afraid of contact. It seems like he relishes and enjoys the contact. I see a guy, to me, that projects himself as a football player first and foremost, athlete second, not the other way around. Sometimes those guys are the athletes more than football players concern me and scare me off. This guy, to me, the way he plays and the way he attacks the game and the way he can get physical, even with a lack of strength, and how hard he consistently played and showed effort to me on film with a good motor, especially in pursuit. Now, I really like that about Leonard Floyd, and the more I watched him, the more I really started to like those attributes. Because will can overcome a lack of skill in a lot of different areas, and Leonard Floyd demonstrated quite a bit of will to go along with, frankly, quite a bit of skill. But when we come to the concerns and some of the talking points and narratives about Leonard Floyd, it's hard to dispute some of them. He's got a really lean frame. He is 6'6" and he's very long. But at 40 pounds, it's really hard to see where that 240 pounds goes. He looks almost real thin. He needs to get stronger. He needs to better round out his body. This is a guy that should easily be able to carry another 15 to 20 pounds of muscle without losing much in terms of athleticism, quickness, speed, hip flexibility. And he needs to put on that weight, and he needs to put on that weight in a hurry, because that lack of strength on that lean frame could cause him a lot of issues in terms of setting the edge. I have some concerns in the running game about him being able to set the edge outside. In terms of shedding blocks, this is, again, we're talking about a guy with those long arms. It's going to be incumbent upon him to use those arms really well and be able to really use his hands effectively, because he's just not going to be able to effectively move big NFL 300-plus pound offensive linemen consistently off the block with that lack of strength. Until he gets stronger, I'm going to have concerns about him being able to get engulfed and overwhelmed at the point of attack in terms of trying to set the edge, and then in terms of trying to rush the passer anywhere other than, frankly, just beating him around the corner. Again, another thing that kind of ties into strength a little bit. I don't think he's a particularly great tackler. Here's a guy that sometimes would take some bad angles, sometimes would set himself up in a bad position, but other times he would just have guys running right through him. And, when you're out there on the edge, sometimes you're the lone man on the island. And if you're keeping contained and you're the only thing that's stopping that play from bouncing outside and becoming a huge gainer, you got to be better in terms of your form and tackling abilities than what he showed to me the past couple of years at Georgia. Now, some people will question the lack of production, and I think it's a legitimate concern. If you're talking about spending a first-round pick on a guy, especially with the thought process being, him sitting there and being a pass rusher, you want to see a guy have more than 4.5, 3.5, 5.5 sacks. That lack of production is a bit of a concern. I think sometimes, though, that can come into and tie into directly how a guy was utilized or how he wasn't utilized. And I think in 2015, part of the lack of production from a sack standpoint was the fact that he was playing a lot inside, and that's just not where he was best suited to play. And that is not going to be where he plays at the NFL level. Some people question his NFL position. I don't. He's an outside linebacker to me in either a 4-3 or a 3-4. And if people can't see that, I personally think they're crazy. In terms of an NFL comparison, I had started off first with Aldon Smith. But Aldon Smith, coming out of Missouri, was about 15, 20 pounds bigger and a little bit more refined as a pass rusher. I'd probably look at Bruce Irvin of the Seattle Seahawks. A guy that went 15th overall in 2012. Speaking of guys that people thought was a second, maybe third-round pick because of his age, off-the-field concerns, he shocked the world by going in the middle of round 1. Leonard Floyd, to me, is a guy that fits that similar type of boat. Could fit well in a 3-4, even though there are some concerns about a lack of strength, a lack of bulk. Maybe feel that he's best to play strong side linebacker in a 4-3, where you can utilize him as a blitzer, you can utilize his athleticism in a good way in terms of coverage. A guy that with an even front will have some of the blockers kept off of him, meaning he could be a little more impactful in the running game. I think that is a fair comparison. I personally think Leonard Floyd's upside is more than Bruce Irvin's was coming out of West Virginia, but I think the comparison is not that far off the mark. When I look at Leonard Floyd overall, though, this is a big-time boomer bust prospect. There's no question about it. In 3 years, he could be one of the very best players in this draft. or in 3 years he could be cut by the team that took him with the first round pick, and people are going to be looking back for years and saying, what the hell happened? He was another Aaron Maben. He was another this guy. He was another Barcavius Mingo. He was another Jarvis Jones. That's another comparison you're going to hear, is that he's Jarvis Jones, because Jarvis Jones went to Georgia and he was an edge rusher, and there are going to be concerns about that. And I sit there and say, well, Jarvis Jones was an overrated media hype in that 2013 draft class that sucked to begin with. Jarvis Jones also had that medical concern about his neck with stenosis. And then on top of that, he just wasn't that explosive. Leonard Floyd is much more explosive than Jarvis Jones was, I assure you of that. He has a really impressive combination of height and length, with that quickness and speed and that burst, that ability to get that edge. I think those are skills that translate really, really well to the NFL level, along with his ability, especially with what he did do in 2015. I think he learned how to be better in coverage. Here is a guy that can be better in coverage. He can be utilized in zone. He can be utilized in man-to-man situations. Long enough and tall enough to be able to go up against some of the top tight ends in the league. I really like a lot about his game. His ability to get stronger is going to be critical to his development and achieving and reaching his NFL potential. If he doesn't get stronger, his chances of becoming an impact player are almost none. He has to get stronger. If he does get stronger, though, the dude could be a force. A dude could be a beast. The lack of production, like I said, could be a little concerning, but I think it's a little misleading, in part because of the way he was utilized this past year by the Bulldogs. That's just my opinion. In terms of this guy, though, I think, again, people are criminally underrating this guy in terms of his talent and his upside for the NFL level. Now, call me crazy, and maybe I am. I think a lot of you are crazy dismissing Leonard Floyd and not being bigger on the Leonard Floyd train. There's still room on the bandwagon if you want to join me. Oh, because I'm probably driving the son of a bitch. To me, this guy's a top 10 to top 15 talent in this draft. He's actually one of the 17, 18, maybe even now potentially 19 players that is going to carry a first-round grade. I think he has really big upside, and I may be wrong, but I think he does. And I think there is a very good chance that he is taken in the top half of the first round, and he surprises a lot of people. But I guess ultimately time will tell. Is he going to be Barcavius Mingo? Is he going to be Deion Jordan? Is he going to be Jarvis Jones? Or is he going to be somebody like Bruce Irvin? Is he going to be somebody like an Aldon Smith? Well, there's a lot of risk here. But in this draft, that really, frankly, doesn't have a lot of great players in it, I'll gamble on Leonard Floyd's boom or bust, because if he booms, he's going to be booming for you in the opponent's backfield for the next 8, 9, 10 years to come at a very high level.